The void expands. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital buzzed incessantly, casting a sickly pallor over the already pale faces of Michael Donovan and Sarah Cooper. They stood outside room 237, where David Cooper lay sedated after his latest episode. The doctors called it a psychotic break, but Donovan knew better. He could feel the wrongness emanating from behind that closed door, a miasma of malevolence that made his skin crawl. "He was fine this morning," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "We had breakfast together. He kissed Emily goodbye before school. And then... Donovan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, ignoring the way his own fingers trembled. "Tell me what happened, Sarah. Every detail matters." Sarah took a shuddering breath. "It was around noon. I was in the kitchen and I heard him screaming, not just in pain or fear, but it was like he was being torn apart from the inside. When I got to his study, he was..." She trailed off, her eyes glazing over with the memory. Donovan squeezed her shoulder gently, anchoring her to the present. "Go on," he urged. "He was on the ceiling," Sarah finally managed, clinging to it like she did that night. But it wasn't just that. His face, Michael, it was melting, shifting, like there were a dozen faces trying to push their way out from under his skin. A chill ran down Donovan's spine. He'd seen something similar during Emily's possession, in those moments when the demon's hold had slipped, and the tormented souls it had consumed had tried to break free. "What happened next?" he asked, dreading the answer. He looked at me with those eyes. You remember them, don't you? That terrible amber. Sarah's voice had taken on a distant quality, as if she were narrating a nightmare. He spoke, but it wasn't his voice. It wasn't even a voice. It was like a chorus of the damned, and it said... Sarah's face crumpled, and she began to sob quietly. Donovan pulled her into an embrace, his own heart racing. "What did it say, Sarah?" "It said, 'The seal is broken, the void hungers, and you opened the door.'" Donovan felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath him. The seal, the void. The words echoed in his mind, stirring memories of that forbidden text he'd glimpsed in the Vatican archives. The rite he'd used to banish the demon hadn't just been dangerous. It had been a key, unlocking something that should have remained forever sealed, and he had turned that key. Before he could process the full implications of this revelation, a blood-curdling scream erupted from behind the door of room 237. Sarah jerked away from Donovan, her eyes wide with terror. "David!" They burst into the room to find chaos. David Cooper's body thrashed violently on the bed, his restraints creaking under the strain. His eyes were open, but where there should have been white, there was only an inky blackness. His mouth gaped unnaturally wide, dislocated like a snake's jaw, and from it poured a torrent of brackish fluid that hissed and steamed where it touched the floor. 2 nurses were already in the room, frantically trying to stabilize David. One was attempting to administer a sedative, while the other struggled to keep him from harming himself. But as Donovan watched in horror, David's flailing arm caught the male nurse across the face. Where his fingers made contact, the nurse's skin began to blister and blacken. "Get back!" Donovan shouted, pulling Sarah away from the bed. "Don't touch him!" The nurses looked at him in confusion and fear, but before they could respond, David's body went rigid. His back arched at an impossible angle, lifting him clear off the bed. And then, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, he spoke. "The prodigal lamb returns. Did you think you could escape us, priest? Did you think your pathetic ritual could bind us forever?" Donovan felt the corrupt power within him surge in response to the demon's words. It took every ounce of his willpower to keep it contained. "I cast you out," he growled through gritted teeth. "You have no power here." David's head rotated towards him, bones cracking audibly. A grin split his face, literally, the skin tearing at the corners of his mouth. "Cast us out? Oh, you fool. You didn't banish us. You opened the door wider. And now the void will consume everything." With that, David's body collapsed back onto the bed. The unnatural blackness faded from his eyes, leaving them glassy and unfocused. The nurses, who had been frozen in shock, sprang back into action, checking vital signs and calling for a doctor. Sarah pushed past Donovan, rushing to her husband's side. "David? David, can you hear me?" But David Cooper lay still, his chest barely rising and falling with shallow breaths. Whatever had possessed him seemed to have retreated, leaving behind only a shell. Donovan stood rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. The void, the door, the seal. The pieces were starting to come together, forming a picture too terrible to contemplate. He had thought the exorcism was the end of their ordeal, but now he realized it had only been the beginning. As the room filled with medical personnel, Donovan slipped out into the hallway. He leaned against the wall, his legs threatening to give out beneath him. The corrupt power inside him roiled and churned, responding to the demon's presence like a snake scenting its mate. He closed his eyes, trying to center himself, but all he could see was Emily Cooper's possessed form crawling across the ceiling. All he could hear was the demon's mocking laughter. "The void will consume everything." Donovan's eyes snapped open as a terrible realization struck him. Emily. If the demon was back, if the seal was truly broken, then Emily was in danger. He had to get to her before. His train of thought was interrupted by the vibration of his phone. With trembling hands, he pulled it out and saw a text message from an unknown number. "The girl is ours again, priest. Come and see what your failure has wrought." Attached to the message was a photo that made Donovan's blood run cold. It showed Emily Cooper, her eyes blazing with that terrifying amber light, standing in front of her school. Behind her, visible through the windows, were the sprawled forms of students and teachers. And on the brick wall of the school, written in what could only be blood, were 5 words that sent a spike of terror through Donovan's heart. "The void hungers. Come feed it." Sarah Cooper's world had narrowed to the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor and the shallow rise and fall of her husband's chest. She sat by David's bedside, her hand clutching his, willing him to open his eyes, to smile, to give any sign that he was still in there somewhere. But David remained unresponsive, lost in a catatonic state that the doctors couldn't explain. They spoke of brain scans and induced comas, of specialists and experimental treatments. Sarah nodded along, but their words washed over her without leaving a mark. She knew in her heart that no earthly medicine could cure what ailed her husband. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her vigil. She looked up to see Michael Donovan standing in the doorway, his face a mask of grim determination. There was something in his eyes, a haunted look that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "Michael, what is it? What's wrong?" she asked, her voice hoarse from hours of disuse. Donovan stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He glanced at David's still form before fixing Sarah with a penetrating gaze. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Emily is in danger. We need to go. Now." Sarah felt as if she'd been doused with ice water. "Emily? But she's at school. She's safe. I don't understand." "She's not safe." Donovan cut her off, his voice low and urgent. "None of us are. What happened to David? It's happening again. And Emily. Emily's at the centre of it. He pulled out his phone, showing Sarah the photo he'd received. She stared at the image of her daughter, at those terrible amber eyes, and felt the last remnants of her world crumble around her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in denial. "No, it can't be. We stopped it. You stopped it." Donovan's expression was a mixture of guilt and determination. "I thought I had. But I was wrong, Sarah. What I did that night, it didn't end the nightmare. It made it worse. And now we have to face the consequences." Sarah looked back at David, torn between the husband who couldn't respond and the daughter who desperately needed her. Donovan seemed to sense her conflict. "I know it's an impossible choice," he said softly. "But David is safe here for now. Emily needs us. We have to go." With a shuddering breath, Sarah nodded. She leaned over David, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I'll be back," she whispered. "I promise. Just hold on." As they hurried out of the hospital, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was saying goodbye to David for the last time. The thought nearly broke her, but she pushed it aside. Emily needed her. She had to be strong. Donovan's car sped through the streets, the tyres screeching as he took corners too fast. Sarah clutched the dashboard, her knuckles white. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How can we fight this?" Donovan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know someone who might. Someone who's faced things like this before. I've been avoiding him, afraid of what he might see in me. But we don't have a choice now." "Who?" Sarah pressed. "Father Thomas McKenna," Donovan replied. "He was my mentor, the one who first taught me about exorcisms. If anyone can help us, it's him." As they neared Emily's school, Sarah gasped. The street was filled with police cars and ambulances, their lights painting the scene in surreal flashes of red and blue. A crowd had gathered behind hastily erected barricades, their faces a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. Donovan pulled the car to a stop and they got out, pushing their way through the crowd. A police officer tried to stop them, but Sarah's frantic cries of, "That's my daughter in there," eventually got them through. They were met by a haggard-looking detective, his face pale and drawn. "Mrs. Cooper, I'm Detective Ramirez. We've been trying to reach you." "My phone," Sarah realized. "I left it at the hospital. What's happening? Where's Emily?" Ramirez hesitated, glancing at Donovan. "And you are—" "Michael Donovan. I'm a friend of the family," Donovan supplied. "Please tell us what's going on." Ramirez sighed heavily. At approximately 2:15 p.m. we received multiple 911 calls from inside the school. Reports of mass hysteria, students and teachers attacking each other. And at the centre of it all, witnesses described a young girl with glowing eyes. Sarah felt her legs give out. Donovan caught her, supporting her weight as Ramirez continued. "When our officers arrived on the scene, they found... I've never seen anything like it. Most of the people inside were unconscious. Some were mutilated. And the girl, your daughter, she was gone." "Gone?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "What do you mean, gone?" Ramirez shook his head. "We've searched the entire building. There's no sign of her. It's like she vanished into thin air." Donovan's expression darkened. "Or like something took her," he muttered. "Excuse me?" Ramirez asked, but Donovan was already turning away, pulling Sarah with him. "We need to go," he said urgently. "Now. We need to find Father McKenna." As they hurried back to the car, Sarah caught a glimpse of the school's brick wall. The message written in blood had been mostly scrubbed away, but she could still make out one word: void. The sight of it sent a shudder through her. As they drove away, leaving behind the chaos and the flashing lights, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading towards something even worse. The void, the hunger, the broken seal. She didn't understand what it all meant, but she knew one thing with terrifying certainty. The nightmare that had begun a year ago was far from over. It was evolving, growing, spreading like a cancer. And somehow, her family was at the heart of it all. As Donovan's car sped through the darkening streets, Sarah closed her eyes and prayed. Not to God. Her faith had been shattered that terrible night a year ago. No, she prayed to Emily, to the little girl she'd cradled in her arms, to the child she'd watched grow and laugh and love. "Hold on, baby," she whispered. "We're coming for you. Just hold on." Father Thomas McKenna's hands shook as he poured himself another glass of whiskey. The amber liquid sloshed over the rim, staining the papers strewn across his cluttered desk. He barely noticed, his rheumy eyes fixed on the television screen that flickered in the corner of his small, book-lined study. The news was full of it. Mass hysteria at a local high school. Dozens injured, a young girl missing. And always, those same words whispered by shell-shocked survivors. The void is coming. McKenna knocked back the whiskey in one burning gulp. He'd known this day would come. He'd felt it in his bones, in the aches that went deeper than mere arthritis, in the nightmares that plagued his fitful sleep. The seal was breaking. The void was expanding. And all because of one foolish, desperate act. "Oh, Michael," he muttered, shaking his head. "What have you done?" As if summoned by his words, there was a frantic pounding at his door. McKenna heaved himself to his feet, joints creaking in protest. He shuffled to the door, already knowing who he'd find on the other side. He opened it to reveal Michael Donovan, looking as haunted and desperate as McKenna had ever seen him. Beside him stood a woman McKenna recognized from the news reports, Sarah Cooper, the mother of the missing girl. "Thomas," Donovan said, his voice rough with emotion, "we need your help." McKenna sighed heavily. "I know, my boy. I know. Come in, both of you. We have much to discuss, and precious little time." He led them into his study, clearing books and papers from 2 chairs. Sarah sank into one, her eyes red-rimmed and unfocused. Donovan remained standing, too agitated to sit. "You've seen the news?" Donovan asked, gesturing to the television. McKenna nodded grimly. "I have, and I've felt it. The disturbance in the fabric of reality, the widening of the breach. Michael, do you have any idea what you've done?" Donovan flinched as if struck. I thought I was saving her, saving all of them. The ritual, it was supposed to bind the demon, to cast it out. And where did you learn of this ritual?" McKenna's voice was sharp, accusing. "Not from me, certainly. Not from any sanctioned text." Donovan's eyes fell to the floor. I found it in the Vatican archives, a forbidden text. I know I shouldn't have. Shouldn't have. McKenna exploded, his frail frame shaking with anger. "You foolish, arrogant boy. Do you have any idea of the forces you've tampered with, the cosmic balance you've upset?" Sarah looked between the 2 men, confusion and fear warring on her face. "Please," she interjected, her voice trembling. "I don't understand any of this. What's happening to my family? Where's Emily?" McKenna's anger deflated at the sound of her plea. He sank heavily into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 70-plus years. "My dear," he said softly, "I'm afraid your family has become entangled in something far beyond your understanding, something that threatens not just you, but all of existence. Donovan paced the small room, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "The ritual I used," he began, his voice low and strained. "It wasn't just an exorcism, was it?" McKenna shook his head slowly. "No, Michael. It was much more than that. What you found in those forbidden texts. It was a key to a door that should never be opened." "The void," Sarah whispered, remembering the blood-scrawled message at the school. "Yes," McKenna confirmed. "The void. It's difficult to explain in terms you'd understand. Imagine reality as a vast tapestry. The void is what exists between the threads. It's nothingness, but it's also hunger. Endless, insatiable hunger." Donovan stopped his pacing, his face pale. "And I opened a door to this void?" "You widened an existing crack," McKenna corrected. "There have always been thin places, where the barrier between our reality and the void is weaker. Doorways, if you will. For eons, there have been those who guarded these doorways, keeping them sealed, preventing the void from bleeding through." "The exorcists," Donovan breathed, realization dawning. McKenna nodded. "Yes, that was our true purpose, not just to cast out demons, but to repair the damage they caused to the fabric of reality, to seal the cracks they created." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes wide. "But what does this have to do with Emily, with David?" McKenna's expression softened with sympathy. "Your daughter, Mrs. Cooper, she was more than just possessed. She became a conduit, a bridge between our world and the void. And when Michael performed that ritual—" "I didn't banish the demon," Donovan finished, horror etched on his face. "I pushed it back into the void, but I left the door open. And now it's coming back," McKenna confirmed grimly. "And it's bringing the void with it. The seal is breaking, reality is unraveling, and your daughter is at the center of it all." Sarah buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Donovan moved to comfort her, but stopped, his own guilt holding him back. "There has to be a way to stop this," he said, turning back to McKenna. "To close the door, to save Emily." McKenna was silent for a long moment, his gnarled fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of terrible knowledge. "There is a way," he said slowly. "But the cost, Michael, the cost would be unimaginable." Donovan squared his shoulders, a look of grim determination settling over his features. "Whatever it is, I'll pay it. This is my fault. I'll make it right." McKenna shook his head sadly. "It's not your price to pay, my boy. The ritual to seal the void. It requires a sacrifice, a willing soul to act as the new seal." Sarah's head snapped up, her tear-stained face a mask of horror. "No," she whispered. "No, you can't mean—" "I'm afraid so," McKenna confirmed. "To close the door, to save your daughter and stop the void from consuming our reality. Emily would have to sacrifice herself. She would have to willingly give herself to the void, becoming the barrier between worlds." The room fell into stunned silence. Sarah's breath came in short, panicked gasps. Donovan looked as if he might be sick. "There has to be another way," he insisted, his voice cracking. "We can't ask a child to die," McKenna finished. "No, Michael, not to die. To endure something far worse than death. To exist for eternity as a living seal, forever holding back the hunger of the void." Sarah surged to her feet, anger overtaking her grief. "No, I won't allow it. There has to be something else we can do." McKenna raised a placating hand. "Mrs. Cooper, please understand. If we don't seal the breach, the void will consume everything. Not just Emily, not just your family, but all of existence. Reality itself will unravel." Donovan slumped against the wall, his face ashen. "This is my fault," he murmured. "All of this. Because of my arrogance, my desperation." "Self-pity will get us nowhere," McKenna snapped. "What's done is done. Now we must decide how to proceed." Sarah whirled on him, her eyes flashing. "Decide? There's nothing to decide. I won't sacrifice my daughter." "Even if it means saving countless other lives," McKenna challenged. "Even if it means preventing the end of everything." Before Sarah could respond, a piercing shriek cut through the air. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, a sound of such primal terror and agony that it set their teeth on edge and sent shivers down their spines. And underlying that shriek was a deeper sound, a bass rumble that they felt more than heard. It was the sound of reality groaning under an immense strain, of the very fabric of existence beginning to tear. "It's starting," McKenna whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "The void. It's breaking through." As if to confirm his words, the room began to tremble. Books tumbled from shelves, and the lights flickered ominously. Through the window, they could see a strange, shimmering distortion in the air, like heat waves on a summer road. But instead of heat, this distortion radiated a bone-deep cold, a chill that spoke of vast, empty spaces and eternal hunger. "We're out of time," McKenna said, struggling to his feet. "We need to find Emily. Now, before it's too late." Sarah looked between McKenna and Donovan, tears streaming down her face. "And then what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What do we do when we find her?" Neither man had an answer for her. The terrible choice loomed before them. Sacrifice one innocent soul, or watch as the void consumed everything. As they hurried from McKenna's study, the world outside seemed to waver and twist, as if viewed through warped glass. Reality was coming apart at the seams, and at the heart of it all was Emily Cooper, a scared little girl with the weight of existence resting on her shoulders. The void hungered, and soon it would feast. Emily Cooper stood at the edge of the abyss, her small form silhouetted against a backdrop of swirling chaos. The school around her had faded away, replaced by a nightmarish landscape where the laws of physics seemed more like gentle suggestions. Gravity shifted unpredictably, sending desks and chairs floating lazily through the air. Walls melted and reformed, sometimes solid, sometimes as insubstantial as smoke. And everywhere the void encroached. It was darkness given form, a writhing mass of nothingness that consumed everything it touched. Emily could feel its hunger, an all-encompassing desire that threatened to swallow her whole. But it wasn't just the void that tormented her. The demon that had possessed her a year ago was back, its presence a sickening weight in her mind. It whispered to her constantly, its voice a chorus of 1,000 tortured souls. "You opened the door, little one," it crooned. "You let us in, and now you'll watch as we devour everything you love." Emily squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the voice, the visions of horror it forced into her mind. "Leave me alone," she whimpered. "Please, just leave me alone." But the demon only laughed, the sound echoing through the twisted remnants of the school. "Alone? Oh, you'll never be alone again, Emily. We are legion, and we are hungry." A tendril of void reached out, caressing Emily's cheek with glacial coldness. She shuddered but didn't pull away. She knew, somehow, that her touch was the only thing keeping the void from surging forward, from consuming everything in its path. "Why me?" she asked, her voice small and lost. "Why is this happening to me?" The demon's laughter took on a cruel edge. "Because you're special, Emily. You're the key, the bridge between worlds, and now you'll be the gateway through which the void enters your reality." Emily's eyes snapped open, blazing with a mixture of fear and defiance. "No," she said, her voice stronger now. "I won't let you. I won't let you hurt anyone else." The void roiled and churned, responding to her emotions. The demon hissed in frustration as its control slipped ever so slightly. "You can't stop us," it snarled. "You're just a child, weak, powerless dot star." But even as it spoke, Emily felt something stirring within her, a warmth that pushed back against the void's chill, a light that shone in the darkness. She remembered her mother's love, her father's strength. She thought of Michael Donovan, who had risked everything to save her. "I'm not weak," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And I'm not alone." The void recoiled as Emily's inner light grew brighter. The demon shrieked in fury and pain. "What are you doing?" it howled. "Stop this! You can't resist us!" But Emily stood her ground, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. The light within her pulsed, pushing back the encroaching darkness. For a moment, just a moment, she felt hope. And then, like a radio suddenly coming into tune, she heard voices, familiar voices calling her name. "Emily, Emily, where are you?" "Mom!" Emily called out, her heart leaping. "Dad! I'm here! I'm here!" The twisted landscape around her shimmered, reality reasserting itself for a breath. Emily caught a glimpse of the school hallway, of her parents and Michael Donovan rushing towards her. Behind them, limping but determined, came an old man she didn't recognize. But before they could reach her, the void surged forward with renewed hunger. The demon's fury lashed out, and Emily screamed as pain unlike anything she'd ever felt tore through her. "You are ours," the demon roared, "and through you, we will devour everything." As Emily fell to her knees, the void closing in around her, she saw the horror on her parents' faces. She saw the guilt and desperation in Donovan's eyes, and in that moment, she understood what she had to do. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I love you. I'm so sorry." With the last of her strength, Emily Cooper threw herself into the heart of the void. As the nothingness enveloped her, she heard her mother's anguished scream, her father's roar of denial. She felt the demon's shock, its fury as it realized what she'd done. And then there was only the void, cold, empty, hungry. But at its center burned a small, defiant light, a child's soul, sacrificing everything to become the seal between worlds. The void hungered, but Emily Cooper stood firm. The door began to close. Sarah Cooper's scream echoed through the twisted remnants of the school hallway as she watched her daughter disappear into the swirling mass of nothingness. David, who had somehow found the strength to join them in their desperate search, lunged forward, heedless of the danger. "Emily!" he roared, fighting against Donovan's restraining grip. "No! Bring her back! Bring my daughter back!" McKenna stumbled forward, his aged face a mask of awe and sorrow. "It's done," he whispered. "The child. She made the choice. She's become the seal." Sarah whirled on him, grief and rage warring in her eyes. "What does that mean?" she demanded. "Where is my daughter?" Before McKenna could answer, reality rippled around them. The void began to retreat, the twisted landscape slowly resolving back into the familiar school hallway. But where Emily had stood, there was now something else. It was a shimmering, translucent barrier, like a soap bubble stretched to impossible size. Within it, they could see flashes of movement, glimpses of a small figure standing firm against a tide of darkness. "Emily," Sarah breathed, reaching out to touch the barrier. Her hand passed through it as if it wasn't there, but she felt a jolt of recognition, of connection. "Emily, baby, can you hear me?" For a moment, there was no response. Then, like a voice heard underwater, Emily's words reached them. "Mum? Dad? I did it. I stopped it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." David joined Sarah, his hand passing through the barrier to join hers. "Emily, sweetheart, it's okay. We're here. We're going to get you out." But McKenna shook his head sadly. "I'm afraid that's not possible," he said softly. "Emily has become the living seal between our world and the void. She's holding it back, preventing it from consuming our reality. If we remove her, then we doom everything," Donovan finished, his voice hollow with guilt and grief. Sarah turned on him, her eyes flashing. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You did this to her. To us." Donovan flinched as if struck, but he didn't deny it. "You're right," he said, his voice breaking. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right, to find a way to bring Emily back without unleashing the void." "And how long will that take?" David demanded, his arm around Sarah's shaking shoulders. "How long will our daughter have to stand alone against that?" He gestured at the shimmering barrier, beyond which they could see the roiling darkness of the void. McKenna sighed heavily. Time works differently where Emily is now. What might be years for us could be an eternity for her, or mere moments. There's no way to know." Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, her hand still reaching out to the barrier. "Emily," she called, her voice choked with tears. "Emily, can you still hear us?" The voice that replied was fainter now, more distant. "I can hear you. I love you, both of you. Please don't be sad. I'm okay. I'm strong. I can do this." David knelt beside Sarah, his own tears falling freely. "We love you too, sweetheart. We're so proud of you. We'll find a way to bring you home. I promise." As the family clung to each other, united in grief and desperate hope, Donovan turned to McKenna. "There has to be a way," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Some other ritual, some way to replace Emily as the seal, to bring her back." McKenna's eyes were sad but determined. "If there is, we'll find it. But Michael, it may take years, decades even, and the cost, it may be higher than we can imagine." Donovan squared his shoulders, a look of grim determination settling over his features. "Whatever it takes," he vowed. "I started this. I'll finish it. I'll bring Emily home, no matter what." As they spoke, the shimmering barrier began to fade, becoming less and less visible. Sarah cried out in alarm, pressing her hand against where it had been. "Emily? Emily?" But there was no response. The barrier was gone, leaving behind only a faint, barely perceptible distortion in the air. To anyone else, it would have looked like nothing more than a heat haze. But to those who knew the truth, it was a reminder of the terrible sacrifice made by a brave little girl. In the days that followed, the world slowly returned to normal. The strange events at the school were explained away as mass hysteria, a gas leak, a dozen other rational explanations. Only a handful of people knew the truth. Sarah and David Cooper returned to their empty home, surrounded by Emily's toys, her clothes, the remnants of a life interrupted. They clung to each other, united in grief and in their determination to bring their daughter home. Donovan threw himself into research, poring over ancient texts, seeking out forgotten lore. He travelled the world, chasing every lead, no matter how slim. The corrupt power within him remained, a constant temptation. But he channeled it into his search, using it to sense the weak points in reality, the places where the void pressed closest. McKenna, despite his advanced age, joined in the quest. His vast network of contacts in the world of the occult proved invaluable, opening doors that would have otherwise remained closed to Donovan. Years passed. The world turned, oblivious to the sacrifice that had saved it. But for those who knew the truth, time seemed to stand still, frozen in that terrible moment when Emily Cooper had thrown herself into the void. 5 years to the day after Emily's disappearance, Donovan found himself once again climbing the worn steps to Father McKenna's study. The old priest had summoned him urgently, claiming a breakthrough in their research. Donovan's hand shook slightly as he knocked on the door. The years of searching had taken their toll. His hair had gone prematurely grey, and deep lines etched his once youthful face. The corrupt power within him had grown stronger, harder to control. There were nights when he woke screaming, the void's hunger echoing in his mind. "Come in, Michael," McKenna's voice called from within. Donovan entered to find the study in its usual state of organised chaos. Books and scrolls covered every surface, and the air was thick with the scent of old paper and candle wax. McKenna sat hunched over his desk, looking even more frail than when Donovan had last seen him. "You said you found something?" Donovan asked without preamble. McKenna nodded slowly, his rheumy eyes grave. "I have. But Michael, you must understand. The price." "I don't care about the price," Donovan interrupted. "Whatever it is, I'll pay it. Just tell me how to bring Emily back." McKenna sighed heavily. "Very well. Do you recall the Codex Umbra?" Donovan frowned. "The Shadow Book? I thought it was just a myth." "Oh, it's quite real," McKenna assured him, "and after years of searching, I've finally located it. Or rather, I've located the man who can lead us to it." Excitement surged through Donovan, tempered by caution. "And this book, it can tell us how to free Emily." McKenna nodded. "If anything can, it's the Codex. But Michael, you must understand. The book itself is dangerous. It's said to be written in the language of the void itself. Simply reading it can drive a man mad." Donovan's jaw set in determination. "I'll risk it. Where do we find this man?" "That's the other problem," McKenna said grimly. "He's currently residing in a maximum security psychiatric facility. His name is Dr. Alexander Petrolov. He was a brilliant physicist, specializing in quantum mechanics and string theory. But his research, it led him down dark paths." "Let me guess," Donovan said. "He got too close to the void." McKenna nodded. "He claims to have seen it, to have touched the fabric of nothingness. It shattered his mind. But before he was institutionalized, he hid the Codex Umbra, and he's the only one who knows where it is." Donovan was already heading for the door. "Then we need to talk to him, now." "Michael, wait," McKenna called. "There's more you need to know. Petrolov, he's dangerous, not just because of his madness, but because of what he knows. If he senses the power within you, the touch of the void, he may try to use you to finish what he started." Donovan paused, his hand on the doorknob. "What do you mean? What he started?" McKenna's face was grim. "Petrolov believes that the void is the key to unlimited power. He doesn't want to seal it away. He wants to harness it, to use it. And if he finds out what you did, what Emily became, He might try to open the door again, Donovan finished, a chill running down his spine. Exactly. So we must be careful. Very careful. Donovan nodded, his mind already racing with plans. I'll contact the Coopers. They'll want to know about this. McKenna raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's wise? They've been through so much already. They deserve to know, Donovan insisted. Emily is their daughter, and if there's even a chance of bringing her back— Very well, McKenna conceded. But tread lightly, Michael. Hope can be a dangerous thing when it's been crushed so many times before. As Donovan left McKenna's study, he felt a familiar stirring within him. The corrupt power, the touch of the void, responding to the mere mention of the Codex Umbra. He clenched his fists, fighting to keep it under control. For 5 years he'd walked a razor's edge, using the power to aid in his search while constantly fighting against its influence. Now, with the end potentially in sight, the temptation was stronger than ever. Just a little more, the power seemed to whisper. Just a little more, and you could tear open the veil yourself. You could bring Emily back without this foolish quest. Donovan gritted his teeth, pushing the thoughts away. He wouldn't give in. Not when they were so close. As he drove towards the Cooper residence, Donovan couldn't shake the feeling that they were approaching a point of no return. The Codex Umbra, Dr. Petrolov, the promise of Emily's return. It all felt like pieces of a cosmic puzzle, falling into place with terrifying finality. And underlying it all was the constant gnawing hunger of the void, waiting, watching, ready to consume everything if given even the slightest chance. Donovan only prayed they weren't about to give it that chance. Sarah Cooper stood at the kitchen sink, her hands submerged in soapy water, her eyes fixed on the window without really seeing. 5 years had passed since Emily's sacrifice, but the pain was as fresh as ever. Every mundane task, every quiet moment, was an opportunity for grief to reassert itself. Behind her, David sat at the kitchen table, absently flipping through a newspaper. He'd aged a decade in the past 5 years, his hair now more grey than brown, deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth. The catatonic state he'd experienced during Emily's possession had left lingering effects, occasional tremors in his hands, moments of absent-mindedness that could last for hours. They lived in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of life without truly living. Their home had become a shrine to Emily, her room left untouched, her photos covering every wall. They clung to every memento, every memory, as if letting go would somehow make her sacrifice meaningless. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the heavy silence. Sarah tensed, her hands gripping the edge of the sink. Very few people visited them these days. Most of their friends and family had drifted away, unable to bear the weight of the Coopers' grief or understand their obsessive hope. David rose from the table, moving to the window. "It's Donovan," he said, his voice a mix of hope and dread. Sarah dried her hands slowly, steeling herself. Michael Donovan's visits were rare, and they always left her feeling hollowed out. Each time she hoped for news, for some breakthrough that would bring Emily back, and each time she was left disappointed. The doorbell rang, and David moved to answer it. Sarah followed, her heart pounding. She could hear the murmur of male voices, and then Donovan appeared in the hallway. He looked older, Sarah thought, worn down by the same grief and guilt that plagued them all. But there was something in his eyes, a spark of excitement, of hope, that made her breath catch. "Sarah, David," Donovan greeted them, his voice tight with barely contained emotion. I think we've found something that might help us bring Emily back." The words hung in the air, freighted with possibility and danger. Sarah felt her knees go weak, and David's arm went around her waist, supporting her. "What is it?" David asked, his voice hoarse. "What have you found?" Donovan took a deep breath. "It's called the Codex Umbra. It's a book, an ancient text that supposedly contains knowledge about the void, about how to open doors between worlds." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "You mean we could open a door to where Emily is? Bring her back?" "Potentially," Donovan cautioned, "but it's not that simple. The book is hidden, and the only person who knows where it is, well, he's not exactly in his right mind." David's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Donovan sighed, running a hand through his greying hair. "His name is Dr. Alexander Petrolov. He's a physicist who got too close to the truth about the void. It drove him mad. He's in a psychiatric facility now, but before he was committed, he hid the Codex Umbra." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes blazing with a fire that had been absent for years. "Then we need to talk to him. Make him tell us where the book is." "Sarah," David said gently, "if this man is as dangerous as Donovan says—" "I don't care," Sarah snapped. "This is our daughter we're talking about, our Emily. I'd face any danger, any madman, if it meant bringing her home." Donovan nodded, a grim smile on his face. "I thought you might say that. That's why I've already made arrangements. We can see Petrolov tomorrow." The spark of hope that had been kindled in Sarah's chest blazed into a full flame. For the first time in 5 years, she felt truly alive. "Then what are we waiting for?" she demanded. "Let's go. Now." David looked between his wife and Donovan, conflict clear on his face. "Are we sure about this?" he asked. "If this goes wrong, if we somehow make things worse?" "How could it be worse?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "Our daughter is trapped in nothingness, holding back a force that wants to devour reality. How could anything be worse than that?" David had no answer. He simply nodded, squeezing Sarah's hand. "All right," he said. "Let's do this. For Emily." As the Coopers went to pack overnight bags, Donovan stood in their hallway, surrounded by photos of Emily. Her smiling face looked down at him from every angle, a silent accusation and a desperate plea. "I'll make this right," he whispered to the photos. "I swear, Emily, I'll bring you home." But even as he made the vow, Donovan felt the corrupt power within him stir. It responded to his determination, his desperation, growing stronger. And with it came the voice of the void, a whisper that echoed in the depths of his mind. "You're so close now," it hissed. "So close to true power. Why settle for rescuing one child when you could reshape reality itself?" Donovan gritted his teeth, forcing the voice back. He wouldn't succumb, not when they were so close to saving Emily. But as he watched the Coopers prepare for their journey, a chill ran down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than they realized. The next day found them standing outside the imposing gates of the Ravenswood psychiatric facility. The building loomed before them, a Gothic monstrosity of stone and iron. Sarah clutched David's hand, her face set in determination. Donovan led the way, his credentials granting them access to the high-security wing where Dr. Petrolov was held. As they were led down sterile corridors, the air grew heavy, oppressive. Donovan felt the corrupt power within him responding to something, a presence, a tear in reality so subtle that only one touched by the void could sense it. They found Petrolov in a padded cell, his wild eyes fixed on a point in space that only he could see. The moment Donovan stepped into the room, Petrolov's gaze snapped to him, a look of terrible understanding passing between them. "You," Petrolov breathed, his accent thick with madness and revelation. "You've touched it. You've seen the void." Sarah pushed forward. "Please," she begged. "You know where the Codex Umbra is. We need it to save our daughter." Petrolov's laugh was a broken, terrible thing. "Save, you fool! There is no saving, only embracing. The void hungers, and it will be fed." As he spoke, the air in the cell began to shimmer and twist. Donovan felt the corrupt power surge within him, responding to Petrolov's words. With dawning horror, he realized the truth. "He's been in contact with the void this whole time," Donovan gasped. "This facility, it's built on a weak point in reality. He's been working to open a door." Petrolov's grin was manic. "And you, my touch-blessed friend, are the key I've been waiting for. Your power, combined with mine, we can tear open the veil. We can let the void in." Before anyone could react, Petrolov lunged forward, his hand closing around Donovan's wrist. The contact sent a shock of power through them both. Donovan screamed as he felt the corrupt energy within him surge out of control. The air split open, a tear in reality itself forming in the center of the cell. Through it, they could see the swirling nothingness of the void, and at its heart, a small figure standing firm against the tide of chaos. "Emily!" Sarah cried, reaching out towards the rift. For a moment, Emily's eyes met her mother's across the gulf between worlds. "Mom? Dad?" Her voice echoed, filled with longing and fear. Petrolov laughed triumphantly. "Yes, come, void! Come and devour this paltry reality." But as the nothingness began to seep through the rift, Donovan made a choice. With every ounce of his will, he turned the corrupt power inward. "Emily," he called out, "I'm so sorry. This is my fault. Let me make it right." Before anyone could stop him, Donovan threw himself into the rift. As he passed Emily, he smiled sadly. "Go home, kiddo. Your parents are waiting." The void surged around him, hungry for his power, his essence. Donovan felt himself being torn apart, becoming one with the nothingness. But as he did, he formed a new seal, stronger than before. Emily stumbled through the rift, falling into her parents' arms as reality knitted itself back together. Petrolov howled in fury and despair as the door to the void slammed shut. In the aftermath, as alarms blared and guards rushed in, the Cooper family clung to each other, weeping with joy and sorrow. Emily was home, but the cost had been high. Years later, on a quiet night, Emily Cooper would sometimes look up at the stars and feel a familiar chill. And in those moments, she would whisper a quiet thank you to the man who had given everything to bring her home. The void still hungered, held at bay by a new seal. But for now, at least, reality was safe. The door was closed, and a family, torn apart by cosmic forces beyond their understanding, was whole once more.